Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Jeff Koo. I'm from Urban Systems, and I will be your host tonight. I would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge that we are located on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Dene, Nakota Sioux, and Métis, and many others whose histories, language, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant communities. Today is a special night. For the first time in our speaker series history, we are trying to live stream the event. So a warm welcome to our friends and guests from near and far. Thank you for joining us. Our speaker tonight is Erin Toop. She holds a civil engineering undergraduate degree from the University of Alberta and a Master's of Applied Science degree in civil engineering from the University of Toronto in transportation policy. Before joining the City of Edmonton, Erin has worked for Urban Systems in Edmonton and at Metrolinx and Neptis Foundation in Toronto. For the past 2 years at the city, she has been a senior engineer in the Policy Development Group, leading policy and planning work on automated vehicles and new mobility, and managing a variety of projects, including the Main Streets program and the delivery of the Edmonton and Region Household Travel Survey. Erin has also recently taken on the new position of General Supervisor of the Urban Places Unit, looking at shaping the city's future. So please help me welcome Ms. Erin Toop.
So thank you for having me this evening. I'm excited to be here to share about the work that the City of Edmonton's been doing on automated vehicles. We're trying to be leading in Canada on this right now, and I think we are more or less succeeding in being one of the leaders, so that's a pretty exciting reputation for the City of Edmonton. This presentation, we originally called it Planning for the Vehicle of Tomorrow. Maybe I'll just step back. Still hear me? Step closer.
I think if you point it down and stand close to it, then it'll be the best. That's what I've been told, pointing it here.
Check. Yeah, okay, great. Actually, what we're talking about is the mobility of tomorrow. I think it's really important to view automated vehicles under the umbrella of new mobility. We can't just look at one technology alone. We've got a lot of different changing technologies right now. So we need to consider this entire new paradigm of new mobility that's evolving from both changing demands and emerging capabilities. So wireless communication and smart devices have allowed transportation to evolve quickly. Car sharing even wasn't a possibility in Edmonton until very recently, and we only got it in 2014. So now many of us have access to an entire fleet of cars that we can get into just by hitting a button on our smartphone. And Uber and other ride sourcing companies, they've leveraged technology to tap into a market for on-demand mobility that we didn't even know existed up until very recently. So we're hopefully heading toward a future where mobility could mean a whole suite of transportation modes available on demand and integrated into a seamless payment system. This future involves a large disruption, though, in the way we're currently planning and providing our transportation services. So luckily, we already have experience with a disruptive transportation technology. So the automobile emerged in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and it began as largely a toy for the wealthy. But by the 1920s, prices had lowered, the auto industry had expanded, and cars were more widely adopted. In the 20s, people began leveraging the potential for the automobile for other uses, and bus and public transportation became a reality. So between 1920 and 1970, we radically transformed our cities and the built environment to not only accommodate, but to support automobile travel. In this period, land uses like drive-throughs and drive-in theaters emerged, and those were something that we wouldn't have even contemplated prior to the automobile. So the adoption of vehicles into society has been supported by, don't quote me on this number because I'm not sure if it's accurate, but bazillions of dollars invested by automobile manufacturers, and to the extent that many people feel that owning an automobile is attached to their self-worth as a human being. So that's some pretty successful marketing, I think. Today, in 2017, we know that the automobile has not been great for health and livability in our cities, but we're struggling to change the systems that we have in place that keep us captive to auto use. And even from the business perspective, the City of Edmonton relies on revenue from parking to support its business and operations. It also employs entire branches of staff just dedicated to traffic flow around the city. So given the lessons we've learned from letting the automobile industry shape our cities, rather than planning for our city building goals and shaping the direction of the industry, we're trying to take a different approach here and now with new mobility. So we want to plan for the vibrant city that we describe in our city vision and then leverage technology to help us get there. We really want to have the role of helping shape technology, and that's why City Council wants us to be out on the front lines of this and trying to lead. So what I'm going to cover in this presentation is just a quick history of the Edmonton's work on automated vehicles, an overview of the study that we did on planning for automated vehicles in Edmonton. That's got a bit more of the technical information in it. Then I'll talk about some of the key current initiatives we're working on. I'll share some of the work that we did in a design lab this winter, and then I'll talk to you about next steps that we're presenting to council just next week. Work on automated vehicles at the city started in summer 2015, and it was with a request from council to report on the state of automated vehicles. That request then initiated a series of council reports and a more concerted effort from our transportation planning team to study the technology. Right away, we launched a study of automated vehicle technology, and then we looped in stakeholders from the City of Calgary, Alberta Transportation, Capital Region Board, University of Alberta, and that's it. Since then, we've continued to collaborate with municipalities across Canada, and we've launched a series of initiatives that support planning and preparing for the automated vehicle technology and new mobility in Edmonton. So next Wednesday, June 7th, I'll be at Urban Planning Committee to respond to our latest council motion, and that motion is around working together cross-departmentally as an administration to address new mobility in all of our plans and strategies. So our original council interest, like I said, was generated in fall of 2015, and kind of the spirit of that motion at the time felt a lot like council didn't quite trust us to be on top of this new and emerging technology. They just felt like they needed to direct us, hey guys, get your stuff together. So since then, council's expressed that they actually want us to be a leader around the technology, not just keeping up with it. They want us to be open to testing new technology, to fostering an environment for learning and education around this new technology, to welcome new industries and economic growth, and then to deliver on our city building goals on top of all of that. So all of this has been a fun challenge for one transportation engineer at the city, and we're hoping to expand our team on this front soon. So now I'm going to tell you a bit about the automated vehicle study that we commissioned that fall. So the scope of the study was to better understand the specifics of the technology, the estimated timelines around the emergence of the technology, and finally some potential transportation and land use impacts that would arrive from the technology. So first off, some key definitions. A connected vehicle is a vehicle that can communicate with other vehicles and with the infrastructure around it. Similarly, connected infrastructure is infrastructure that's equipped with communication devices that can communicate with smartphones or GPS units or vehicles themselves. An automated vehicle is a vehicle that's capable of driving itself. It may or may not be in communication with other vehicles or the infrastructure around it, but these technologies are largely converging into kind of connected and autonomous vehicles. Most new vehicles are equipped with communication devices, and most manufacturers are working on automating their vehicles. So the Society of Automotive Engineers defines 6 levels of vehicle automation. In the first 3 levels, a human driver monitors the driving environment, and in the last 3 levels, an automated driving system monitors the driving environment. And level 5 technology would make those self-driving taxi robots a possibility. So that's the bottom row on this slide. Right now, level 2 automation is available on the market, and Tesla has made this popular. We're already seeing safety issues with this level 2 technology, though. I think there was a big crash that was in the news a few years ago. And so this is why many cities in the US are looking at banning partial automation or level 3 automation from city roadways. Level 3 automation requires that a human driver intervene in a really complex situation, but only in a complex situation. So you can imagine how drivers are sitting in their vehicles most of the time, losing all of the driving skills that they used to have, and then they're only asked to take over a vehicle in the most ridiculous of situations. And I don't think that's not going to be a great thing. So level 4 technology, it's also being developed and it's being sold by companies like Easy Mile and Navia already. A lot of municipalities are purchasing these shuttle buses that are under development. These vehicles do not require a human driver to intervene, but they can't handle all complex situations in an urban environment, so they need some kind of safety measure like lower speed to ensure that they're safe. The small light-duty shuttles on the market right now by these companies are what the City of Edmonton is interested in piloting so that we can demonstrate applications of automation in a transit capacity and kind of get people's mind wrapped around the idea that we might want automation in the transit system rather than everyone having privately owned automated vehicles. So we also asked our consultant to do a jurisdictional scan to understand how far other jurisdictions have come with adopting or demonstrating automated vehicle technology. So there's a number of places in Europe where these minibus pilot tests have already occurred. In Singapore and some places in the US, there are test beds that are being developed by technology companies. And in states like Nevada and California, and very recently in Montreal, and there's a few people in this room who I know have ridden in an automated shuttle recently, so I'm hoping they'll speak up at the end of this presentation. They've been demonstrating the capability of these shuttles. So when it comes to predicting when we will see level 5 fully automated vehicles driving on city streets, there are 2 timelines to consider. The first is the emergence of the technology, and the second is people's willingness or appetite for adopting the technology. So emergence is the time it will take to develop the technology. Predictions on this vary quite widely from 5 years to many decades from now. There are some challenges around sensor reliability and winter conditions that need to still be overcome. There's also a lot of ethical challenges around, are we programming the vehicle to run into the city bus or run into the pedestrian that's crossing the street in front of it? So there's some really tangly frameworks that are going to have to be programmed into these vehicles in the first place. And then there's also legal and liability issues around who's responsible for crashes and things like that. Adoption is the time it takes for the majority of the fleet owners to purchase vehicles or the technology. And using some local fleet data, our consultant came up with these adoption curves, the red being the most aggressive and the blue being the least aggressive. So we're estimating that that could be about 18 to 30 years, depending on the appetite. So just out of curiosity, who in this room, if automated vehicles were available today, would hop in one and go for a ride on city streets? All right, we've got some early adopters in here, I think. So in total, what we're expecting in Edmonton is there's maybe a 23-year-ish planning horizon on having these vehicles operating on the ground. So the meat of our study looked at some scenarios around transportation and land use impacts of the technology and whether vehicles would be owned by individuals or owned by fleet owners like Edmonton Transit or taxi companies or auto manufacturers for that matter. So what we found in the scenarios where individual Edmontonians were owning their own private automated vehicle is that we don't want that scenario. So it induces more automobile trips onto the roadways because driving's a lot easier. You can multitask while you're driving. We spend a lot of time as transportation planners trying to get away from one occupant vehicle trips. In this scenario, we'd be fighting 0 occupant vehicle trips, and that feels pretty regressive. There's also opportunity for dispersed development, remote parking, and just things we know we don't want in our city vision. On the other hand, the public and shared ownership model has the opportunity to reduce private auto ownership and kind of put money back in people's pockets, back into the economy. We would use ride sourcing in suburban areas where there's not enough demand to provide a full city bus, and then have rapid transit serving the high demand corridors in the city, where, like LRT corridors that we've currently planned. We'd also hope that active transportation remains the mode of choice for short trips, and just in general, we'd have a more balanced and equitable mobility system in Edmonton. So in all, we're trying to avoid this scenario where technology takes us over and we want to say, this is how we want technology to work for us and still work toward a healthy city where we don't need to move to another planet and Earth isn't the garbage dump of the future. So in order not to have that dystopia to happen, our consultant had a few recommendations for us. To continue to support walking, cycling, and complete streets, to support the alternatives to auto ownership that we have now, to start getting people used to the idea of not relying on a car, to deploy partial automation in the transit system to make transit more efficient. So there's a lot of ways you can partially automate transit that can let buses kind of more precisely dock at bus bays and things like that we could be leveraging right now in our transit system. We also want to think about reducing parking requirements because parking is potentially a really bad investment in the future if we have automated vehicles. So don't build parkades now, justifying it with a 20-year growth rate in parking. And then finally, to consider the cost of growth in new development so that we're paying the real cost of new development. And again, trying to curb sprawl now where we can to prepare for this future where it might be a lot easier to get around. So finally, of course, he suggested that we develop a comprehensive automated vehicle strategy, and that's something that we'd be looking at as part of new mobility in our new work plan. So in all of our work to date, we've been collaborating with other municipalities across Canada. We're working really closely with Calgary, Vancouver, and Toronto because we all have similar council motions to stay on top of the technology and start dedicating resources to working on this technology. There's also a recognition that cities need to work together on this right now because if we all have similar goals, we're not going to be developing really different plans or strategies to get toward those goals, and we can just leverage each other's ideas and be stronger for that. We've also been developing relationships with the private sector and collaborating with our counterparts at Transport Canada and Alberta Transportation because each level of government has a different but related role to play in this technology. And so while the federal and provincial governments are sharing responsibility for governance of the technology, it's the city and provincial governments that are sharing responsibility for the deployment of it. So now these are the current initiatives that we're working on around new mobility and automated vehicle technology. So there's four main ones I want to talk about. The first is around testing the technology. And so this is the Active Aurora project. And it started as a partnership between the federal government, provincial government, Edmonton, U of A, and UBC. Phase one involved connected vehicle corridors in Edmonton and was launched in September 2016. So we actually have connected infrastructure installed right now on some traffic signals on 23rd Avenue. This is the first test bed of its kind in Canada on public roads, and it does put Edmonton out in front for that. So it's allowing the city to implement and test transit and fire preemption along 23rd Avenue. So giving fire trucks priority in the event of an emergency. And our traffic operations group is working on that project. So phase two of Active Aurora was initiated in December 2016. And that involved more the automated vehicle side and my team in city planning. And so it added Fairmont Hotels and the city of Calgary to the partnership. The goal of phase two is to build a safe testing facility on U of A South Campus where we can evaluate the safety and operation of a light-duty electric automated bus. So because the province doesn't allow the operation of automated vehicles on highways, which seems fine, except for highways are anywhere in Alberta that humans can access pretty much literally according to the Traffic Safety Act. So even sidewalks are highways according to the province. So we're trying to push the province to amend that so that we can have some wiggle room to be innovative. But we have to build right now a fenced off facility on U of A South Campus so that we can just overcome that one hurdle with the province, try to test how these vehicles operate, ensure that they're safe, and then relax the legislation. So that's our goal with this phase two test track and pilot. The second initiative was focused on supporting alternatives to auto ownership in Edmonton, and that's the car sharing strategy. So we initiated that in late 2016, and that was to better understand the benefits of POGO in Edmonton. We wanted to understand the extent to which POGO is allowing Edmontonians to reduce auto ownership to really understand if we need to be supporting POGO more as a city. So we found that each Pogo car represents 8 cars that Edmontonians don't need to own, which is a pretty exciting benefit. So that also represents a savings of about 900 tons per year of greenhouse gas emissions. And for a comparison, I don't know if I should say this live on the internet. For a comparison, the Metro LRT line is estimated to provide about 1,800 annual tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And that costs the 3 orders of government about $700 million in capital alone. And Pogo car share costs the government nothing to operate. So to me, there's a pretty good business case, I think, for the city to support Pogo. The third initiative is the transit strategy, and it contemplates integrating new technology into the transit system, as well as looking at partnerships and compatibilities with, say, Uber and Edmonton Transit in lower density areas. So it's going to look at providing kind of on-demand rides, say, in areas where there's less frequent bus service in Edmonton. And so finally, the fourth initiative is exploring how we can tap into the big data that's generated by taxis, Tapcar, and Uber in Edmonton. And through the Vehicle for Hire bylaw, we're working with these companies on how we might share data so that the city can begin to model and understand travel patterns around these ride-sharing companies. And that's really important because ride-share behavior is the thing that's going to emulate automated vehicle trips most closely in the future. So in addition to the ongoing initiatives on the last slide, this winter we also conducted a 2-day design lab focused on answering the question, how might we use automated vehicle technology to build a more effective transportation and land use system in Edmonton? That's a big question. So a design lab we thought was a good process to try to explore that question with. A design lab is a process that draws on strengths, empathy, creativity, and wisdom of a collective to explore new ways of making progress on a complex challenge. So my engineering interpretation of that definition is that it's like a dynamic workshop where outcomes are not predefined and the facilitators guide the participants through defining the challenge, constraining the issue, prioritizing issues, and then developing solutions or prototypes. So that's what we did in the lab. The attendees were a diverse group of City of Edmonton staff from across all departments. We also included representatives from Edmonton Economic Development, the U of A, Alberta Transportation, Alberta Economic Development, the technology development industry, the freight industry, and the land development industry. And I'm sure we could have had more stakeholders at the event, but we had limited capacity for 2 days. So the process we went through included framing the question and constraints. We had some constraints around we're not going to bust open Edmonton's future LRT network. We're going to assume that we're building LRT as we've planned. So let's not revisit that in this 2-day exercise. We also went through a process of describing our ideal future state, prioritizing key issues, and then developing solutions to address those issues. So I think this is an ugly slide, but it's also my favorite slide. So I think a cool part of the lab is where you take the problem and then you say, where is Edmonton currently and where do we want it to be? And we really felt like we were an awkward teenager. So we're kind of out there dealing drugs on the street, collecting revenue from parking, and where we want to be is having taxation mechanisms that actually reflect our city goals. We want a more diverse economy. We want to be willing to take risks. We want to communicate well with our decision makers. And the part I really like is about we want to embrace failure, we want to fail often, and we want to learn from those failures. We don't want to be scared of doing that. So that's kind of, through the lab, we tried to focus on issues that would get us to being that sophisticated adult and less so the awkward teenager that we are today. We also defined some priority issues that we thought were really touching on this automated vehicle technology and how people are getting around the city. And so these priority issues then informed the types of solutions we looked for at the end of the lab. So I think a big one in this was the inclusivity and equity and making sure that in an automated vehicle future, we do a better job than we're doing today and try to have people, all people, able to move around the city. So what we came up with at the end of the lab were some prototype solutions for four key areas, and those were policy development, a data collection program, defining scenarios for modeling and analysis, and ideas for integrating automation into the transit system. We also had 3 areas that we thought were important but just didn't have enough people to flesh out solutions for. So that was the economic development plan, a pilot project program, and a communication and engagement strategy. So the outcome of the lab, and part of why we were conducting the lab, is we have a branch manager in LRT design and construction that really wants to make sure that the LRT that we're planning for the future is future-proofed and resilient. So I think that was a great initiative, and that was what was driving those integrating automation into the transit system solutions. The other part of why we were doing the lab was that I had to report back to council with a work plan about how all of Edmonton administration are going to work together to solve these problems. And the best way to come up with a work plan is not to come up with it yourself, I think. So we had a huge group of people help us do that. We took the outputs of the lab and basically organized it into this work plan that's going to go forward to council on Wednesday next week. And so a lot of it is bundled under the transportation and land use system planning, and that will be largely led by the city planning branch. And then we have a communications and engagement plan that will be relying a lot on our communications department to produce. And then Edmonton Economic Development has been super collaborative on this. I've been meeting with them quite regularly, and they've agreed that I agree and they agree that they would be the best people to produce an economic development plan. And I'm sure you're all relieved to hear that. So that's basically that. What this goes forward to council with next week is also an estimate of the number of resources, staff, and funding that we would need to produce this plan, and then we'll see what they think about their appetite for that. But I'm excited. It would be great if we do get some resources to do this, because it's a lot of work, and we've got a lot of momentum going right now, and I would really love to see it continue. And that was my last slide. So let's discuss.
Which really does encourage lower speed limits overall in the system?
I think that's a good point, that maybe we don't even need level 5 technology if everyone just moves around slower. We're talking about really slow, though. I think most of them are operating in kind of like the 13 to low 20 kilometers per hour. So they wouldn't be a good kind of rapid or longer trip solution. But I think we're definitely contemplating Vision Zero in this policy development, and making sure that that's a big city goal that we want reflected through this as well. Yes?
Has council expressed any interest in exploring the impacts to workforce in the city of Edmonton or in cities, positive or negative, and if there are transportation implications, how do we weigh them with the resiliency of our metropolitan area in the future?
Thanks for the super easy question. So that was whether council's considered the labor force impacts of this new technology and how we're factoring that into our decision making around it. Is that a good paraphrase? We've brought that up as an issue. I think it's one that we're not focusing on right now. What we are focusing on is we've got Edmonton Economic Development telling us that if we embrace this opportunity right now, it could be a multi-million-dollar industry in Edmonton, and there could be a lot of opportunity to help reskill people. There's some concern over if we automate the transit system, what does that mean for transit operators? But I think everyone still sees a need for a human being to be on the transit vehicle so chaos doesn't break loose. Like, I think we'll still need transit bus supervisors and things like that. So it's something we're thinking about, but I think we're kind of blazing ahead anyway and trying to be resilient. I just don't have an answer about how we do that yet. So that was, how do you make the world a better place? How do you how do you keep mode shift as a goal, and I think address the fact that behavior change is a tough problem. That was something that we talked a lot about in the design lab, and kind of where we had some priority issues, and one of those was the acknowledgement that behavior change is hard. I think that's why the pilot project program has got a lot of emphasis in this work plan, is that I feel like if we start introducing alternatives, but we're not marketing them as permanent alternatives necessarily, we just know that we need to try things out, see how it goes. If people really like it, if it does prove to be a good alternative, let's keep it and grow it. I think piloting has a good track record of being a favorable way to make change. Okay, question is how we make sure that the spirit of this work plan is reflected in the work that other departments are doing in an ongoing way. What council's asked is that we come back with a work plan for how we work together interdepartmentally. So that's kind of baked into this, is the assumption that it cannot be done by one department alone, that everyone has to buy into this. And that's the direction that we're getting from our city leadership, is we need to act as one city. We can't have like a rogue planning department doing something that the infrastructure department isn't willing to implement. I'm not going to say we're great at that yet, but this has been a really positive experience, actually. Like, one of the drivers of looking into new technology is a branch manager in the LRT delivery. So he gets it, and he's building LRT, and we talk regularly. And so that, I feel like it's just all about us at the city having to kind of work on our networks. So this was to what extent the private transportation providers are embracing the technology or working on the technology. Uber definitely is. I think they're very openly in the news looking at automated vehicle technology. Pogo, I'm not sure. I think we kind of see that as the model going forward, is the city as a bureaucracy is not the most nimble organization, and probably shouldn't be trying to develop the technology, or maybe shouldn't even be operating it. And what we need to do as a government is just be on the ball with establishing partnerships with those organizations that are providing mobility services and doing a better job of it than we might be. So that was, how well do the province and federal government's plans align with the cities? So the city, we just sent 2 letters to the province a couple weeks ago to the Minister of Transportation, asking them to hurry up and try to fix that Traffic Safety Act so that we're able to realize some of our goals in this work plan around pilot programs. The province, I think, is working on it. It's been a slow process, and so as the city, we kind of feel like we need to advocate a bit for moving the needle on this. The federal government, they're working a lot on the operational side of things, looking at like what communication wavelengths connected vehicles need to communicate on and reserving that wavelength. And I think they've got a lot of staff kind of dedicated to thinking about the policy side of things as well. So I feel like everyone's kind of on the same page and moving at different paces, but we all have a bit of a different scope to look at as well.
Do you feel as though some of the underlying kind of major ethical issues would become a barrier to kind of adoption of automated vehicles by a government entity, and maybe not so much a third party, but so much as acceptance by the city or Transport Canada?
I think they're going to be, so this was whether ethical issues are going to be a challenge with the government's adopting the technology. And I think it will be a big challenge, because it's a lot of things to agree on, and it's a lot of pretty contentious things to agree on. But I suspect that auto manufacturers, I think, everyone's investing a lot of money in developing this technology. So I think there's going to be an investment in spending the time to figure out those ethical solutions as well.
With major auto manufacturers shooting for a deadline of 2021, so 4 years, to have level 4 vehicles available to the public, and our transportation infrastructure not being ready for them, because really only Germany is implemented wireless charging roadways. Have we looked into that on changing our structure to build our roadways to charge these vehicles while they're driving?
I'm not sure. So this is whether we're looking at our infrastructure and its capability to keep up with the technology, and specifically have roadways that can charge electric vehicles. One of my colleagues is working on the electric vehicle strategy at the city right now, so I'm not sure that that's part of the scope of it, but a lot of municipalities are viewing automated vehicle technology as something that doesn't necessarily need an infrastructure intervention. Like, we don't need to build new infrastructure for this technology because the developers of it want it to be able to hit the ground running and don't need cities to catch up. I think with the electric vehicle side of things, for sure, there's a charging station issue and making sure that people have access to charging and innovative ways to charge those vehicles that we need to consider. But I'm not sure about the specifics.
Yeah, so there's been some talk that these vehicles could potentially drop you off and circle the block while you shop and not have to park at all, or drop you off at work and then drive home and then fetch you later. Has any thought been put into the impacts of this, how these vehicles could actually add to the congestion problem?
So this is a question on kind of the negative implications of privately owned, did I just go by it? Privately owned automated vehicles. So that exact scenario you described is sort of what we understood to be a negative implication of when people are going to own their own private autonomous vehicle. Then you would see behavior kind of like that. And what we would rather see is a world in which our public transit system's really efficient, and in areas where it's just doesn't quite make sense to provide a regular bus, we have automated taxi robots that are able to come on demand and pick you up. So hopefully kind of a more efficiently used fleet. So the question is, Calgary is close to implementing their automated vehicle pilot, and are we able to reach out to them for lessons learned? My response is false. I work really closely with that team at the City of Calgary, and as I maybe mentioned, where did I have that? That Active Aurora Phase 2 project that we talked about, the test track and AV pilot, that's what the City of Calgary is talking about. We're collaborating on that test track and pilot because all cities we need to collaborate to test whether an automated vehicle functions according to the province's expectations before the province is going to allow any of us to run our own individual pilots. So that's why we've got a lot of Fairmont Hotels, City of Calgary, City of Edmonton. We are all interested in trying out one of those shuttles, but we need to get through this test track and pilot before we can do that. Maybe one more question. Okay, so the question is kind of like around equity, concern for people who have mobility challenges. How do we integrate this into the DAT system and have it actually work? I agree that that's a huge concern. And I was at a conference in Toronto a couple weeks ago where we had an entire session on equity challenges around this new technology. And I thought one researcher brought up a really good point around when we're talking about this stuff, we often just assume that smartphones are ubiquitous, and we have a lot of seniors who have not even adopted the technology. We have a lot of people that just carry a cell phone around for emergencies, so we're leaving out a ton of population if we assume that a smartphone is a baseline. And then we also have some really, really crappy transit service for people with mobility challenges. And if artificial intelligence or machine learning needs really good data to feed into it to learn and adapt into the future, and we don't have good data on certain populations, we run a huge risk of leaving them out. So I think that's something I'm aware of and something our team at the city is aware of, and we're trying to keep that in mind moving forward. Okay, so the question was how the city's been collaborating in the international sphere on this technology. This is great because Sean asked me this question last night, so I've got a perfect answer for it. We're not directly collaborating with international partners right now, but the City of Calgary is who we are collaborating with, and they've done a lot of work reaching out to to Las Vegas, to Singapore, and I think Helsinki as well, to just understand lessons learned from those cities. And they're sharing those lessons back with us. So that's been nice, is that kind of via our collaboration in Canada, we're getting access to that knowledge from other areas.
Great. Sorry to cut all the questions a little short. Round of applause to Erin. Thank you so much. A quick thank you to all of you for coming out and participating in the speaker series and asking some very great, engaging questions. Please check us out for our next few events coming out through the rest of the summer. Also taking this opportunity to thank the venue, Yellowhead. Thank you to their staff, and always a great venue. We've been coming here, this is our 5th year here, and we continue to enjoy this space. It really brings about collaboration and conversation and discussion. So yeah, and we want to thank our AV people helping us with our live feed, Kiwi Productions. So thanks to them. And thanks to our sponsors, Urban Systems, who made this event possible and made it free so that everyone could come out and enjoy themselves, learn, network. So with that, we're just going to end the formal part of this event. Thank you all again. That wraps it up.